Break with a purpose. For many people here at Press House, BWAP is a time during winter break when a small group of people go on a meaningful trip. But after going on this trip and seeing our history where it happened, I found myself asking, what does it really mean to break with a purpose? In case it may be hard to follow, when I ask this question, I am no longer talking about the winter break. I am speaking of the verb, the action of breaking. On this trip, I saw so many things that were broken by the violence of racism. People, communities, homes, places of worships, and hearts. But what I found to be the most significant was the breaking of silence. Barry McNeely was our walking tour guide on one of the days we went to Birmingham. Mr. McNeely took us through Kelly Ingram Park across from 16th Baptist Church. Mr. McNeely shared with us the history of the Children's Crusades. He ventured into how the children, ages ranging from 6 to 18 years old, skipped classes and came together to lift their voices as they marched through downtown Birmingham in protest of racial segregation. The first day, every single student was arrested. Over 1,000 students were placed under custody. The very next day, the children went out and protested again. And this time, they were met with police and their dogs, as well as firefighters and their hoses, which were strong enough to take the bark off of the nearby holly trees. My ancestors worked so incredibly hard to be heard. They faced chains, whips, imprisonment, hoses, dogs, bombs, poverty, nooses, genocide, and the list certainly doesn't end there. What absolute horrors my ancestors, our siblings, have faced. But these horrors didn't stop them. Despite overwhelming pressure, they didn't silence their cries of outrage, screams, songs, protests, and love. I'm living proof that they were heard. They were brave enough to break the silence. On our way to Birmingham, one day, our team read Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. Together in the van, in the letter, King says, "We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people." Silence is easy. When the perfect words fail us, when we don't allow ourselves to engage in fear of what others might think of us, when we don't want to take up too much space or attract too much attention, or when we fear what speaking out might mean for us, it is just so easy to be silent. But today, I would like to extend an invitation from those who paved the path before me. Break the silence. It may be hard and uncomfortable, but have the hard conversations. We cannot overcome injustice if we don't speak about it. Be vulnerable. Speak out. Fail and try again. Yell, cry, sing, share your story, and stir up some good trouble. Be heard.
As Christians, we are taught about this radical love that God has for us and wants us to extend to others. We are told we have a responsibility to love others as we would ourselves, to treat others how we would want to be treated. But after this trip, I no longer think that's true, or rather that it is that simple. I think we have a responsibility to love others differently than we would love ourselves. Now, this might sound a little counterintuitive, so bear with me here. It's no secret that people are different in many ways and need to be loved in different ways. So, if I love my neighbor exactly how I would want to receive love, they may honestly never know that I love them, because it's not how they experience love. Many of us are scared to ask one another about our lives, our experiences, and our history. And as a white person at a predominantly white school in a very white state, in a country built around whiteness, I am not forced to think about how race affects my life. I have the privilege of choosing silence in conversations about race and racism. And sometimes that silence is chosen with good intentions, not wanting to take up space or say the wrong thing. But conversations have two sides. And choosing silence can sometimes be more harmful to the people we love. As a team, we grappled with how silence of white students was harming the students of color during our team conversations. One evening, we all sat together on the couches in the living room of our lodge, and students of color on the trip asked the white students why we were choosing silence. As white students, we didn't realize that our silence was actually saying something, that we didn't care about what our friends of color were experiencing on the trip because we had nothing to say about it. Our silence was hurting our friends, and their courage in asking us this question opened the door for a conversation about privilege, guilt, shame, and how to work through those things to love each other well, despite the different experiences we were all having. The conversation we began as a team on the trip is one we hope to continue in community here at Pres House. To love someone is to know them, and to feel loved is to feel known. As a white person in this country, I must be okay with making myself temporarily uncomfortable so I can know and love people of color well, so I can love them differently, to love them in a way that knows and cares for their story, their history, their suffering, their struggle, their grief, their triumph, their determination, their strength, and their grace. And that means breaking the silence, asking questions, being curious, and getting to know all of who my siblings of color are. As a white person, it can feel scary to ask questions about experiences we have the privilege of not knowing. And it can be hard to realize we have said or done something to harm someone we love. But remaining silent is so much worse. Remaining silent ensures we will never have a chance to apologize, grow, and foster closer relationships with those around us. If you have been afraid to engage in conversations about race, to learn more about history, or to build friendships with people of color, I challenge you to ask yourself, what exactly am I scared of? Loving someone more? As we face a time in our nation of great uncertainty, anxiety, and injustice, do not forget the legacies of the leaders who came before us. Let us break our silences so we can love our neighbors the way they need to be loved and forge a community of deeper connection.
When I think about living a life of protest, I think about something exciting and adrenaline-inducing. I think of marching in the streets and yelling and large-scale mobilizations. I think of big names in history, of icons, and of legacy. This is in no small part because of how I imagined the civil rights movement looked. But something I learned in Alabama was how the movement was sustained by community. People approached strangers at restaurants and asked them to come to marches and protests. They worked behind the scenes, debating ideas and strategies for how to care for each other. The people who made the movement work were not its public faces, but the foot soldiers, people whose names were not publicized or iconized. They were committed to doing the hard work of getting to know each other and building networks of community care and support. This struck me in particular when learning about the Montgomery bus boycott. Many people know the story of Rosa Parks' arrest after refusing to give up her seat for a white passenger. What many people don't know is that this was a planned protest. That night, a woman named Joanne Robinson, along with 3 other people, printed over 30,000 leaflets to pass out to Black people in Montgomery, telling them to boycott the buses. Within a few days, Montgomery's Black citizens started the boycott, organizing a free citywide carpool using personal vehicles and hearses borrowed from funeral homes for more than a year. The boycott lasted until the Supreme Court declared segregation on buses was unconstitutional, and the city of Montgomery complied. This movement and its victory wouldn't have been possible without the strong community networks in Montgomery's Black community, created and sustained by the movement's foot soldiers and allies. They sacrificed for each other and built something beautiful and strong with their sacrifice. I think there is an ongoing cycle in today's world where every now and again we pause and let ourselves engage with the horrors of other people's realities or even our own reality and get fired up. We may protest or engage in difficult conversations with friends or post something online. But eventually, we use up all our energy and return to our creature comforts and the places we have privilege. We fall back into the complacency of our daily lives, which revolve around feeling safe and happy. And then the cycle starts again the next time something tragic happens. It's easy for anyone to get caught up in this cycle, especially as students. Right now, we can live in academia and focus on homework and exams and spend our days thinking about the good that we'll do and who we'll become when we graduate. I personally struggle to know when and where to engage. And when it seems like nothing I do really impacts anything, it's easy to just focus on my own life. I think the key to breaking this cycle is not building more energy, but building more community. When we witness the suffering of people we are in community with, we engage differently. It ceases to be something that leaves our mind when the news cycle shifts, or something we view as disconnected from ourselves. When we build this kind of community, I think we can find that being happy and being engaged in a life of social justice are not mutually exclusive, because community does not just sustain a movement, it also sustains us. In community, we find care, mutual aid, and support. It is where we learn to be happy even in the midst of adversity. Press House is a place of deep love and community care, and I think we can go even deeper. We can do more to talk with each other about the reality of race in our lives, and we can sustain that conversation for more than just a news cycle. But it will take all of us choosing to break the silence, lean in, and love each other, even when it's hard.